The donkey, Saul, lifted his head for the first time in 3 days when he felt cool water touch his parched lips. In that moment, under the flash of dozens of cell phones and the hushed murmurs of a crowd gathered by the roadside, he didn't know he was becoming a symbol of transformation that would forever change the lives of everyone present. But to understand how we arrived at this moment of redemption, we must return to the beginning of that sweltering Thursday morning as the sun struggled to rise over the orange horizon of the Texas plains. Robert Miller adjusted his Italian silk tie as he watched the donkey through the tinted window of his BMW X6. The animal had been there for 3 days, tied to the dry trunk of a mesquite tree, shivering with fever under the relentless sun. To Robert, this was merely a problem to be solved as economically as possible. The donkey had been used to carry equipment during the installation of telecommunication towers on his ranch, but now, sick and unproductive, it represented only an unnecessary expense. "Leave him there," he said into his cell phone, speaking to his operations manager in Dallas. "Old animals are useless, nature will take care of the rest." Robert owned one of the largest agribusiness companies in the country. At 52, he had built a financial empire by buying land in the Southwest at bargain prices, mechanizing production, and eliminating what he considered sentimental waste, including the upkeep of traditional pack animals. To him, efficiency was synonymous with profit, and profit was synonymous with success. While speaking on the phone, he didn't notice the donkey's eyes watching him through the car window. They were eyes that had seen much in those 15 years of life. They had seen children playing on his back. They had seen abundant harvests carried on his back. They had seen tears of joy from families receiving supplies he transported during the harshest droughts. But Robert saw none of that. He saw only numbers, spreadsheets, productivity indices. 200 miles away, Joel Silva was checking the load of his Scania 113 truck for the last time. Bags of beans, rice, basic medicines, and donated clothing filled the truck bed. It was another one of his monthly trips, bringing supplies to needy communities in the countryside. It wasn't work that earned him much money. In fact, he often paid out of his own pocket to supplement the donations, but it was what gave his life meaning since he lost his wife in an accident 5 years earlier. "Today I'll go through Lubbock, then Amarillo, and if I have time, I'll even make a stop in El Paso," he murmured to himself, studying the old yellowed road map he kept on the dashboard. Joel was 43 years old, with prematurely graying hair and calloused hands from years of honest labor. He grew up in a family of 6 siblings on a ranch in rural Texas, where he learned early on that those who don't care for the weak don't deserve the respect of the strong, as his father, a rancher of few words and much wisdom, used to say. He started the truck's engine and crossed himself, as he did before every trip. He didn't know that on this day, he would do much more than deliver donations. He would make history. Maria Rita Santos, known to everyone as Mrs. Rita, was sweeping the yard of her simple home when she saw the BMW pass by for the second time that week. She had lived on that plot of land 3 miles from the main road for 60 years and knew every person, every animal, every story in that region. When she saw the luxury car stop near the old mesquite tree, she felt a pang in her chest. "That man doesn't look like good news," she commented to her 16-year-old granddaughter, Isabel, who was studying for the SAT under the shade of a pecan tree. "Rich city folks always bring trouble to country folk." Isabel looked up from her history book and observed the scene in the distance. "Grandma, isn't that the donkey that saved little Peter from drowning?" Mrs. Rita adjusted her glasses and squinted. It was him, Saul, a name the community had given the animal after the incident at the pond 2 years earlier. The donkey had pulled Mrs. Rita's grandson out of the water when the 8-year-old boy slipped on the rocks and was swept away by the current. Since then, Saul had become a beloved figure in the region, always well cared for by his former owner, old Mr. Antonio, who had passed away the previous year. "That donkey has a history, girl. He saved a life, carried hope, consoled sad people. Whoever harms an animal like that is harming their own soul." Robert finished tying the rope that bound the donkey to the tree trunk, making sure the animal couldn't move. To him, It was simply a practical matter to leave the animal isolated until nature ran its course, avoiding any legal or financial liability. He had bought the animal along with other improvements from the late Mr. Antonio's ranch. But he had never been interested in the history or the sentimental value that the donkey represented to the community. As he tightened the knots, the donkey tried to rest its head on his arm, a gesture that in any person with a minimum of empathy would arouse compassion. To Robert, it was merely an annoyance. "Get away from me, you dirty beast," he grumbled, pushing the animal's head away with one hand. "You've given all you had to give, now you're just dead weight." What Robert couldn't understand was that Sol wasn't trying to bother him. The animal, even in its weakened state, recognized in that man someone who needed help, perhaps not physical, but spiritual. It was Sol's nature to offer comfort, even when he was the one who needed it most. Hours crawled by. The sun beat down mercilessly, and Robert retreated to the air conditioning of his car, making business calls as if nothing was happening a few feet away. Periodically, he glanced at the animal through the tinted glass, hoping the situation would resolve itself. Joel stopped at a gas station on Highway 407 to refuel his truck and grab coffee. It was his ritual before tackling the longer stretches of his journey. While paying, he overheard two truckers discussing a Dallas playboy who had been seen abusing animals in the area. "They say he's got a donkey tied up in the scorching sun for days, no water, no food," commented one, a middle-aged man, wearing a Petrobras cap. "The rich jerk is just waiting for the poor thing to die." Joel's stomach churned. He'd grown up in a culture where animals were treated like family, where horses and donkeys were respected as work partners, not disposable objects. He asked for directions and decided to detour. "Maybe I can't do much," he thought, as he returned to his truck, "but at least I'll take a look. No one deserves to die abandoned." If you're following this story, and it's touching your heart the same way it touched so many hearts that day on the Texas plains, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more moving accounts like this, true stories of compassion and transformation that happen every day in our country but rarely make it to mainstream media. Here, you'll find humanity at its purest and most inspiring. Mrs. Rita couldn't stay home anymore. She grabbed a bottle of water and some mesquite leaves and walked to where the donkey was tied. Robert had gone to a steakhouse in town for lunch, leaving the animal alone under the blazing sun. "Oh my God, Sol, what have they done to you?" she murmured, observing the animal's deplorable condition. The donkey lifted its head with difficulty when it recognized her. Its eyes, normally bright and expressive, were dull and watery. Mrs. Rita wet a cloth with water and gently wiped the animal's muzzle. Sol closed its eyes in relief. It was little, but it was all she could do without getting into legal trouble. After all, technically, the animal belonged to someone else. "You've saved so many people, my son. Now someone needs to save you." She went back home and called her sister, who lived in town. In minutes, the news spread through the family's network of contacts, then through the church's WhatsApp groups, the schools, the residents' association. Social media began buzzing with indignant comments and calls for action. Joel spotted the luxury car parked by the roadside and slowed down. Even from a distance, he could see the donkey tied to the tree trunk. He stopped his truck a few feet away and slowly got down, his heart pounding. The scene was even worse than he'd imagined. The animal was visibly dehydrated, trembling, its head down, its breath ragged. Around it, the ground was dry and cracked, no shade, no water, no food. It was a scene of cruel abandonment that violently contrasted with the nearby luxury car, its air conditioning blasting. Joel approached slowly, speaking softly to the animal. "Easy, friend, easy. I'm here to help you." That's when Robert returned from lunch, and the two men came face to face. "What are you doing here?" Robert asked, getting out of the car defensively. He wore expensive clothes, designer sunglasses, and had the bearing of someone used to being obeyed without question. Joel looked at him, then at the donkey, then back at him. "This animal is dying, can't you see? It's my animal, I can do whatever I want with it," Robert retorted, checking his phone as if the conversation were just a minor inconvenience on his schedule. "And you have nothing to do with it." "Yes, I do," said Joel, with a firmness that surprised even himself. "Anyone who sees an animal suffering like this has something to do with it." Robert scoffed. "You? I don't even know who you are. Trucker, ranch hand, whatever. You don't understand business. This animal doesn't produce anymore, so it has no more value. That's how the world works." "The world may work that way for you," replied Joel, taking a bottle of water from his truck cab, "but for me, it works differently." He knelt beside the donkey and began to give the animal water, which it drank greedily. Robert tried to protest, but it was too late. Some people from the community began to arrive, drawn by the comments on social media. Mrs. Rita was the first to appear, followed by her granddaughter, Isabella, who held her phone, recording everything. Then came other residents: Mr. John, the grocery store owner, Mrs. Conception, a retired teacher, young Marcus, who worked at the city hall, the butcher's family, students from the municipal school. "That's Soul," someone shouted in the crowd. "The donkey that saved little Pedrinho." People began to tell stories about the animal, how it had carried medicine during the dengue fever epidemic 3 years earlier, how it helped children cross the creek during the rainy season, how it consoled lonely elderly people, letting them caress its velvety muzzle. Robert found himself surrounded by dozens of indignant people, all with cell phones pointed at him. He tried to argue that he owned the animal and had legal rights, but his voice was lost in the growing murmur of the crowd. That's when Dr. Henry arrived. A veterinarian who graduated from the University of Bahia, he had returned to his hometown to work with farm animals, but also volunteered for emergency cases. Someone had called him, and he drove 12 miles to get there. "Let me examine the animal," he said, opening his makeshift bag. After a few minutes of examination, he stood up with a serious expression. "Severe dehydration, heat stroke, possible respiratory infection. But it's treatable. This animal can be saved." The crowd applauded. Robert tried one last time. "Doctor, you can't interfere. This animal is my private property." Dr. Henry stared at him intently. "Sir, abandonment and animal abuse are crimes under the law. What I see here constitutes both. I can call you as a medical witness in any possible legal action." That's when Robert realized he had lost control of the situation. The videos were already being shared on social media. The people around weren't just onlookers, they were a community united in defense of one of their most beloved symbols. With the help of Joel and other people from the community, Soul was carefully transported to a small makeshift veterinary clinic in Dr. Henry's backyard. The animal was weak, but responded well to the initial treatment: saline solution, antibiotics, vitamins, and above all, human care. Joel stayed there throughout the first day, helping to care for the animal. He had postponed his donation delivery trip. For the first time in 5 years, something was more important than his scheduled mission. "Why did you do that?" asked Isabella, Mrs. Rita's granddaughter, who had become a kind of informal reporter of the story, documenting everything on her social media channel. Joel thought for a moment, watching Soul resting on a makeshift bed of clean straw. "You know, girl, when my wife died, I thought about giving up everything, but then I remembered something she always said. We can't save everyone, but everyone we save makes a difference. When I saw that animal there, tied up, abandoned, I remembered her. And I remembered that we're only human when we take care of those who are weaker." Meanwhile, the videos of Soul's rescue spread on social media like wildfire. What had started as local outrage turned into a national commotion. Thousands of people shared the story, commented, were moved, and were indignant. Journalists from major media outlets called the city hall for information. Animal protection NGOs offered help. Politicians tried to associate themselves with the cause. Famous artists reposted the videos on their profiles. Robert, who had returned to Dallas hoping the case would be forgotten, woke up the next morning with his picture featured on news websites across the country. "Businessman abandons sick animal to die in the plains," one headline read. The cruelty of predatory agribusiness, said another. His company began receiving calls from clients canceling contracts. Suppliers questioned his integrity. Investors demanded explanations. In a few days, what seemed like a minor problem turned into a national-scale reputation crisis. The lesson, but the most beautiful story, was happening in the small town in Texas. Sol was recovering quickly, surrounded by the affection of an entire community. Children from the elementary school made drawings for him. The local bakery donated day-old bread to feed him. The gas station offered clean water daily. Joel extended his stay for a week, helping with the care and organizing a campaign to raise funds for a small local animal protection NGO that spontaneously formed around Sol's case. "You know what strikes me most about this whole story," he said during a conversation with Dr. Henry and Mrs. Rita on the 5th day of the animal's recovery. The three were sitting on the porch of the makeshift clinic, watching Sol grazing peacefully in the backyard. "It wasn't just us who saved Sol. Sol also saved us." "What do you mean?" asked Dr. Henry. "Look how many people met because of this story. How many felt useful, important, capable of making a difference. How many young people like Isabella discovered that they can use social media for good. How many communities across Brazil are looking here and thinking we too can unite when necessary." Mrs. Rita smiled. "My father always said that God put animals on earth to teach humanity to human beings. I think Sol came to remind us of that." The outcome 3 months later, Sol was fully recovered. The small town had become a point of solidarity tourism. People came from afar to meet the hero donkey and to visit the social projects that had emerged inspired by his story. An elementary school was built with donations raised through the campaign. A local craft cooperative was created to generate income for families. An environmental education project was implemented, with Sol as its mascot. Joel returned to his donation delivery trips, but now with a network of supporters across the country. People who had been moved by the story contributed monthly to his work. He managed to buy a bigger truck and hire 2 assistants, former unemployed people from the region who had been involved in Sol's care. Robert tried in every way to rebuild his public image. He hired public relations firms, made hefty donations to animal protection NGOs, and gave interviews apologizing. But the damage to his reputation was irreversible. He lost important contracts, had to sell some of his properties, and ended up leaving agribusiness to work in a smaller family business. The most ironic part is that, 2 years after the incident, Robert returned to the region, not as a wealthy businessman, but as a man seeking redemption. He sought out Joel, offered a sincere apology, and offered help with the community's social projects. It was a long and painful process of acknowledging his mistakes, but he gradually managed to regain the respect of some people. The symbolism Sol became much more than a community pet. He became a symbol of resistance, solidarity, and compassion. His image was used in educational campaigns across the country. Children's books were written about his story. A popular song was composed in his honor. But perhaps the most profound impact was on how that small community came to see itself. They had discovered they had power, the power to mobilize, to defend their values, to make a difference in the world. What began as the salvation of an abandoned animal transformed into a lesson about collective strength and human dignity. Dr. Henry opened a permanent veterinary clinic in town, specializing in free care for animals belonging to low-income families. Isabel secured a scholarship to study journalism, inspired by her experience documenting Sol's story. Mrs. Rita became a kind of informal community leader, organizing solidarity campaigns that spread throughout the region. The final meeting, 5 years after the rescue, Joel returned to town for a special celebration, Sol's birthday, which had become a municipal holiday. The donkey, now 20 years old, was healthy and happy, living in a sanctuary built specifically for him on the outskirts of town. During the ceremony, Joel was invited to speak to an audience of hundreds, including officials, journalists, and visitors from various parts of the country. "When I stopped on that road 5 years ago," he said into the microphone, I thought I was just helping an animal in distress. I didn't imagine I was participating in something much bigger. Today I understand that Soul wasn't saved by me, nor by you. Soul saved us. He saved us from indifference, from selfishness, from the idea that we can't make a difference. He paused, looking at Soul, who was grazing peacefully in the green grass of the sanctuary. Sometimes we think we need a lot of money, a lot of power, a lot of influence to change the world. But the truth is, all it takes is a heart willing to see the suffering of others and do something about it. All it takes is someone who stops on the road when everyone else drives by. The audience applauded emotionally. Children from the elementary school sang a song they had composed about Soul. The mayor announced the creation of a permanent animal protection fund in the region. But the most moving moment happened when Robert appeared at the ceremony. Few recognized him. He was thinner, simpler, wearing everyday clothes instead of the expensive suits he used to wear. He timidly approached Joel and asked permission to speak to him privately. "I wanted to apologize," Robert said, his voice choked with emotion. "Not just for that day, but for taking so long to understand what you understood right away. That an animal isn't a thing, that suffering can't be ignored, that power doesn't give you the right to be cruel." Joel looked at him silently for a few seconds, then extended his hand. "The important thing is that you understand, and that you're here." The two men shook hands, and Robert discreetly joined the group of people who cared for Soul's sanctuary, contributing with volunteer work and modest but constant donations. Epilogue today. 10 years after that scorching day on the highway, Soul's story continues to inspire people across the United States. The donkey lives peacefully in his sanctuary, surrounded by care and affection, receiving visitors who come to meet the animal that taught a whole country about compassion. Joel, now 53, has expanded his donation distribution work to several states. His fleet has grown, his team has multiplied, but he has never lost the simplicity and willingness to stop on the road when someone needs help. Mrs. Rita, at 80, remains the living memory of the community, telling her grandchildren and great-grandchildren the story of the day a simple truck driver and a sick donkey changed everyone's lives. The small town prospered with compassionate tourism, but maintained its essence of a united and welcoming community. The children who grew up hearing Soul's story became adults with strong values of compassion and social responsibility. Robert, now 62, works as a consultant on rural sustainability projects, helping small producers develop more humane and ecological practices. He never again had animals under his responsibility, but he learned to respect them deeply. And Soul remains Soul. He still looks into the eyes of those who approach him with that expression of understanding, of welcoming, of forgiving. He still allows children to caress his velvety muzzle. He still teaches every day that dignity does not depend on species, that compassion has no price, and that a heart willing to love can transform the whole world. At the town's elementary school, a plaque at the entrance bears a phrase that has become the community's motto. Solano taught us that no matter how small you are, you can always make a difference in someone's life. And when people ask Joel why he stopped on that road that distant day, he always gives the same answer, with a serene smile on his lips, because he looked me in the eyes. And nobody who looks at you like that deserves to be abandoned. Soul's story reminds us that true heroes don't wear capes or have superpowers. Sometimes they're just ordinary people who choose to stop when everyone else drives on by, who choose to lend a hand when it would be easier to turn a blind eye, who choose love when the world seems full of indifference. And sometimes humanity's greatest teachers come in unexpected forms, like a scrawny donkey with teary eyes, tied to a dry tree trunk on a forgotten back road in the Texas plains, who managed to awaken the best in each of us.